So now let's start with the first session. And I'm pleased to introduce you to Katja Filzek, Senior ESG Strategist at Union Investment Luxembourg. So this first session is hosted by Union Investments, and Katja will provide some market insights on green transition finance in reality. Thank you, Katja. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the very kind words. I'm also very happy to be here today in person after, I think, 2 years of digital participation. That's very, very nice, especially in that surrounding. I am here today to bring a little bit practice in our discussions. So we as a major asset manager in Germany, and we also have a dependency in Luxembourg, we have also clearly to set our way through all that very nice European regulation efforts. And I would like to present to you today one concept we use, I think, still pretty uniquely in the market, and that is called our so-called transformation rating, because we believe we cannot only work with companies who are by regulatory definition green. We think it's a very important element to finance the transitioners or the green transition, because that is actually where the biggest gap is, also with regards to CO2 footprint and improvement. So my presentation today will start, first of all, with describing a little bit the challenges we see as an asset manager. And then, as I already mentioned, our solution, or one of our solutions, that's our concept called transformation rating. And maybe start, first of all, with the challenges. I mean, I might have brought as well not only the Ukrainian flag with me today, but also the Israeli flag. But the presentation was already submitted pretty early. But you should also think about, it's, as you already mentioned, the speaker before me, we do have a time of very big geopolitical risks and things happening around us. And that's why I also have brought with me a trilemma, not a triangle, but it's actually a trilemma. And that's what we face as a sustainable investor. And this is, we do have the issues with energy security, also in face of a war, but then also clearly the social components. What was also mentioned before is the cost side of energy. And clearly, last but not least, our agenda and our way to become more sustainable on an energy supply. And I'm not sure who have seen that already, but the IAA has recently submitted its new net zero scenario, so a new pathway, just I think 2 weeks ago. And there you could already see that they extended the use of coal globally. At the same time, they reduced gas. And that's also something where we as an asset manager have to, place our investments around these issues that might also change. It might also change very rapidly, and that's the trilemma in which we are. So we also have to jungle around with these elements of our energy supply. Then maybe to also mirror a little bit what the speaker before has told us, I mean, we all know that the EU taxonomy was meant to be a guiding path and a way of giving us thresholds and elements of how we should define a sustainable company. However, when we look at the EU taxonomy, and we did that before, and we monitor a major global equity index, you can see that probably aligned with the taxonomy might be 3% of all companies in the MSCI Global World Index. This is when you apply very conservative, do no significant harm criteria as well. Just to give you an example out of an industry which is also well known, the automotive industry. Just imagine that if you are building an electric car, then the taxonomy defines it as 100% green, but only if you supply 4 tires on it, which are also eligible according to the taxonomy. If you do significant harm because your tires are from, let's say, compromised areas in Indonesia or some other areas, and they do not fulfill some human rights policies, then your 100% as an electric car maker will vanish to 0. So, and this is just an example when you try to be conservative and you use the taxonomy. So let's put it this way, it's pretty much unusable. And if we take, therefore, a very conservative view, you can see we cannot work with the kind of 3% alignment in the world of a fund manager or in asset allocation. So that is also a challenge we have. That also gets together with what was mentioned before with the issues of greenwashing, because clearly the thing is always when you cannot place with very defined green products or green investors, you need to find ways how to you can still justify without getting into the way of greenwashing that you open up your investment universe. And then we have and then just as a summary, as I mentioned, we cannot work currently with just one element, which is an element like the EU taxonomy. It's simply not workable in practice. Then I want to share with you another challenge we have, and that's actually the last one before I come to the solution. And this is an example of a major data provider in the ESG world. It's MSCI. And you might be familiar with the fact that they usually tend to come from a controversy standpoint. So they valued companies on their financial risk of becoming involved into scandals. And then they came up with these ratings and they then kind of spill it over to their ESG scores and also to their impact scores. And if you would just look at this map, you can see it's the automotive sector by MSCI when you look at the ESG rating. And now think, please, about best in class 50. Here you can see if you are a sustainable investor, you should go with companies in the automotive space who are located in India, in China, South Africa, and in Brazil. I'm not sure who thinks that is intuitive. I think maybe not, but that's currently the rating split of your best-in-class versus worst-in-class companies. And where this is coming from, clearly from our old legacy controversies we had among many, especially European companies in that sector. I think Russia is pretty obvious why it's red, but nonetheless. And this is clearly something where we need to be very aware of. So if you only go with third-party data providers and ESG ratings, the view or the signal these might present to you might not be, let's put it this way, right, or maybe completely not useful for looking into the future, because it's mirroring developments from the past. So that's why we think we have to evolve from our old investing 1.0 approach, which is going via exclusions, which is going via also engagements, but which is also going via scoring methods. We think we need to have a more comprehensive approach. And this is called our Investing 2.0, and that is called transformation. So we want to identify companies who are transforming, transitioning, and even more importantly, we want to get back from these backward-looking ESG scoring models. So just looking into the past, we want to find a way to look in the future. So how good are the strategies? How good are companies positioned to avoid stranded assets and to deliver on promises like transition or net zero pledges or carbon pathways? And now let me just make a, I will give you an example out of the praxis, and I hope you might help me with that we can together find out how we would value or make such a transformation rating. And we do that in a sector which I'm also used to cover. This is actually the automotive sector, and you should be familiar with that, I believe. So the thing is, what are the future questions? I think it is unspoken that we will develop from internal combustion engine cars to the electric vehicles. I think that's pretty obvious, and that should be the plan for the industry. Okay, nonetheless, what are the biggest obstacles? And you might be also aware that currently the EU and the regulation is only looking at tailpipe emission. We think that's wrong, or not wrong, but it's a short-sighted view. There are more important things, and what is more important, it is thinking about life cycle. So it's not very, let's say, practical for us in a global world that we have good air here in Luxembourg, that there's nothing coming out of the tailpipe, while at the same time Chinese or Korean suppliers build new coal supply or new utilities, which are then coming up with a too high CO2 footprint. So where are we looking in the automotive industry? Which are the most important KPIs? The first one is battery manufacturing. So is the battery in the car, which is roughly 40% of the value, how is that battery manufactured? What is the CO2 footprint of that? And when you look currently at the market, you can see they're more or less all coming from China and more or less in areas where coal is the major utility supply. So therefore, you have to ask the companies, okay, guys, what is the carbon footprint of the batteries? That's actually now a EU directive in which we're heading to, which we like very much, and that's also the so-called subsidy investigation heading to in the automotive industry, so that governments can decide, okay, what kind of car do I subsidize here? Please provide me your CO2 footprint. And we need a strategy here that CO2 footprint comes down. Secondly, also very important and directly connected to that is, do you have a recycling strategy? So where is the raw material, all the lithium, the nickel, where's that coming from? And do we have an idea how we can bring that back into circularity, that we can use it several times? Is there an element included as well? That is also a EU directive which will come. So you have to have ministry requirements in every car of reused material, raw material. And then last but not least, also very important is human rights. I think the speaker after me will highlight that as well. So we clearly have to be sure that there are no conflict materials in our cars. So that is very important for us as well, because we are also pledged to the UN Global Compact, and we should not, let's say, close our eyes for developments here just to have a better tailpipe emission phase in our cars that we drive here. So these are some major KPIs we are focusing on when we look into a transformation in the automotive space. And now let me just start with you a little test, or let's do it together maybe in a very practical example. So we have here two companies in the automotive space. You should be familiar with them. On the one side is Tesla. It's best in class 50. So usually when you're a sustainable investor, that company scores green. And then we have good old Volkswagen. You should be aware that that is very low in the very worst in class 50 element. So, and then you can also see their newest electric cars, which are now up for sale. Tesla is the one with the Cybertruck, and Volkswagen is the one with the ID.3. And now let me just ask the audience, before we go into detail into a comparison of these companies, what do you think? I spoiled already who is best in class 50, but who do you think is the more sustainable car? Could I get hand signs for anybody who would vote for Tesla in the audience? Thank you, very brave. Thank you very much. I don't make the comparison because maybe that will get embarrassing. Okay, let's go through with that, what we do now in practice. So I showed you already some of our KPIs, but let's go directly on E, S, and G into both. So let's go with E, with the battery CO2 footprint. So when we ask both companies, and we do that, and we also look into clearly their publications, who has a strategy for decarbonizing the battery supply? Meaning you not only get to your suppliers a clear contract that they will reduce the coal energy. No, also you want from them that they guarantee to you that they recycle materials. This is also very important, that you know what raw materials are in the car. So in case of one of our two examples here, there is even blockchain involved. So they do have, well, from the mine, a blockchain, it's a digital asset where they can see that raw material goes then from the mine to the refinery in China, from the refinery in China via another blockchain back into the production site in Europe. So one of these companies have that. Actually, it's Volkswagen. Tesla would have the blockchain, but they didn't use it yet. But they do not have, they have no strategy on reducing the CO2 footprint on the batteries. Then going into S, that's also the element of how they treat with human rights and with their employees. Here also one of these companies, as I mentioned, has the blockchain available, but also has abandoned certain raw materials they do not source from Congo, like cobalt, and they also try to reduce the Russian input in nickel. So, and then when it comes to employee rights, I mean, it's all over the press. The one is heavy unionized, the other none. So here you can also make your math, but nonetheless also that plays in favor of Volkswagen. When we then go to governance, I mean, clearly that's also an element which is very important to us. Here it's pretty simple to sum it up. Both are very bad. No point in that, so bad notes. But nonetheless, in essence, when we do our comparison and when we do our ratings here, you can see at least we believe Volkswagen should have a chance as well to get into a sustainable pack and to be investable, but only as a transition candidate. And this company then will be re-rated every year. So every year they have to fulfill the KPIs and they have to deliver. And if they don't for another year, then they're out again, out of the pack. Unfortunately, though, we have not yet shared our transformation rating with Tesla. I think it's better this way, but I haven't met Elon in the past weeks. So to sum my presentation up, and then I would be also happy to take your questions if you have some, I would like to showcase here to bring an example of one of our flagship funds which uses this strategy, and that's actually our Global Equity Sustainable Fund. And here you can also see we are very conservative when it comes to exclusions and investment universe. But then we also clearly apply our transformation rating approach into that, only with candidates who score well and who we can also justify that every year they score very well. And yeah, as you can see, it's not a strategy for minor funds. It's really also something for large funds. And what we like especially is now that the EU is thinking of changing the classification of fund. You might be all aware of these Article 9, Article 8, Article 6 funds. And if they now switch to a way of thinking, we will have ESG integrated, we will have impact, and then we have transition. That would clearly fulfill exactly that, what we believe, what we're doing already since 3 years, because we think that kind of transition or transforming strategy is something where investors are like to be invested in, they understand it, and that's also a pathway to actually decarbonize the real world and not only playing around with ESG ratings and taxonomy data, which is very hard to tackle and very hard to actually make operative in a large fund. Yeah, and with that, I'm at the end, and I would be more than happy if you have questions please challenge me. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you, Katja, for hosting Union Investment for hosting this. It works. Marche. Okay. Was a question for Katja?
That's right.
Hello, thank you for the great presentation. My name is Laurence, and I am coming from the car industry, from the manufacturing industry, and working 20 years in this industry with each year's new requirements. To be better on the ESG, on the environment goals. And so I appreciate very much your comparison. I have 2 questions. The first one is about the ranking of the car makers, just because you have made this comparison between Tesla and Volkswagen. Have you got a complete ranking of all car makers? Because that's so interesting and so motivating for investors to know who is greener, who is better. I must say, I have met 2 weeks ago, at least, Innovations Institute here in Luxembourg, some car makers who showcase excellent values. So we could engage the topic. And the second question is more general, but maybe you prefer to start with the first, about the ranking.
Yeah, actually the ranking, maybe as you think about it, I mean, we are in Europe, so the legislation here is already very tight. And I also, let me be a little bit cynical, would say after the diesel scandal, I believe that the European OEMs were completely aware that they cannot afford to trick us again. So that's why they started the whole electric vehicle, not like you read in the press, like they slept and they didn't want to. They started to construct that in a way where the product can deliver its promises. They saw from the beginning they are dependent on China with all the raw materials and the refineries, but they from the beginning start to score them, to tell them, give me your CO2 footprints. They open up the SAP systems to have all the data, they have it. That's the battery pass, the famous one, which will come now 1 year earlier next year. And from that ranking, you can already see the Europeans are really leading it. However, I also have to say I'm very positive surprised from General Motors. They're also there. Ford is lagging. Tesla would have been there because they have it and they are aware, but they don't really sell it and they don't need to. I mean, the same thing is when you see the ESG rankings, when you score very high, you don't need to deliver more policies because you know you're already very good.
Okay, thank you for this answer. Just about the batteries. Nobody knows really how to build the right battery, yeah? Because nobody has a priority target. So it means today this ESG target or environmental target is not given as target, as first target. The target could be today non-flammability, no accident risk of fire, for instance. So that's security, and on the other side, sustainability.
May I just directly answer to that? Because that is not true for car makers like BMW and Volkswagen. They have in their net zero commitments a clear pathway of building the greenest car and to reducing it. Until 2030, that's also SBTi aligned. So they have that target, the hard target, and they also share with you their scoring of the suppliers. So how much they have and how much are already moving down. So they do have that. That's incremental in their targets as well. Except for security. But security always comes with the car. That is clearly for which they can go into prison. The other one is just when you have an ESG analyst on your toes.
Thank you again, Katja. Thank you for the question and to Union Investment. So I would like now to move on to the next session,